Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Thomas Wayment, and we're going to talk about birth stories of Jesus Christ. What is fact and what is fiction? It's going to be a really fun conversation, and I hope you check it out. I also want to thank Casey Niederhauser. He has helped me do a little bit of a facelift on my website, so it looks a lot better. And for one thing, the donate button is a whole lot easier to find now. So thanks, Casey. Click on the yellow donate button, or you can also subscribe for $10 a month. And you can get a copy of this transcript and all future transcripts if you want to do that. Also subscribe on Patreon for just $5 a month if you want to hear the whole interview uninterrupted. So that'll be really cool. And I really do want to thank Casey. He's actually a web developer, and so he's got his own website, CaseyNiederhauser.com. So if you need web help like I did, especially last week, Casey was a lifesaver, and so check him out. And so thanks, Casey. It looks a lot better, and I really appreciate your help, more than you will ever believe. Now back to our conversation. Well, welcome to Gospel Tangents. I've got my first New Testament scholar on the podcast, so I'm really excited about that. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tom Wayment, and my background is New Testament studies, primarily Christian formation. I do a lot of work on Greek New Testament and Christianity in its Greco-Roman environment.
That's awesome. So we are definitely going to hit the New Testament today, so I'm super excited about that. And with it being December, I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about the birth of the Savior.
Sure.
And so I know, and I'm not trying to create controversy or anything like that, but I do know that I think it was about 8 years ago, there was an article by Jeffrey Chadwick that said that Jesus was born in December. And then I think you said no, it was April. So I'd kind of like to flesh that out a little bit and see, what are some reasons? I mean, because the New Testament isn't very clear about when Jesus was born. So
no, it's not. No, in fact, to clarify, a colleague and I, Lincoln Blumell, we really push back against the idea that we can know within a year or two. So we immediately agree with this notion. The New Testament's not very specific or very, very clear, and so our intent wasn't to say no, it's not really December, it's April. Our intent was to say, well, we can't know within that kind of time frame, especially not a month, and a year we might get within a year or two is about the best we can do. But as a historian, if you take sources that don't care about that point, Matthew doesn't care to tell you this is the birthday of Jesus, and Luke, and he doesn't really care to tell you that, and then make them say that thing, it's really against what they were originally trying to do. So that was our kind of overarching idea.
Okay. So, I guess one of the things that there's even a dispute about what year he was born.
Yes, there is.
So, I think people who don't think about it very much would just say 0, which there is no year 0, right?
Right. Right. And what's really fascinating about this period is all kinds of different calendar systems are involved. So if you're in Egypt, you accept one date for Augustus's reign, and if you're in Israel or Galilee, you accept another date. And so you count everything from a date like Augustus's ascension or Tiberius. And Luke does that, right? He says this is in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. And that's how their world works, and you tie it to historical events. And when you want to create a modern date from that, you say, well, this year that Luke is telling us is really this one in Matthew. And you try to say, I hope Matthew's using the same date for Augustus's reign, because, by the way, there are at least 2 different times when he started his official reign, depending on which province or if you're in Italy. And you have to kind of do all of this real, puzzling. And then once you put that all together, you can say, well, I think we're back at this date. And that's what Chadwick is saying. I think I've solved the puzzle. And I think what Blumell and I would say, I don't really think you can solve that puzzle that precisely.
Okay. So, from what I understand, it seems like what's the best, and even if we go with a decade, what's the best guess for what year Jesus was born? Let's go with the year first.
Yeah, that's probably the most straightforward thing we can do. It seems that everyone agrees Herod was alive when Jesus was born. And that gives us a pretty good point after which we can start talking. Herod dies in 4 BC, 4 BCE. So he, if we take our calendar, that's a date there's not a lot of dispute about. I've seen a recent monograph on his life, and some are saying maybe it's spring of 5 BC. So when we say that, we can be pretty confident that Jesus is born in or about 4 or 5 BCE. But we already now have a year that we're fudging on, but that's pretty tight. That's pretty good.
Okay. What is the latest people would go with for Jesus' birth?
Depending on what data they're emphasizing now, 2 to 3 BCE is about the latest anyone goes.
So as early as 5 BC and as late as 2 BC?
Yeah, that's about the span.
Okay.
And that happens in the Christian period. 150 years after Jesus dies, people start to say, gosh, I wonder when he was born. And they start calculating it and realize they come up with 2 to 3 BCE. That's their calculation. They tend to not place as much weight on Herod for some reason. The modern scholar places a lot of weight on Herod's reference, but they tend to look at other things. One real monkey wrench here is that Luke says that there was a census by a man named Quirinius, or Cyrenius in the translation that a lot of Latter-day Saints use, and he is governor of Syria in 6 AD. So there is no possible way that Herod can be alive and Cyrenius does a census in the same span. That's a 12-year, roughly 10 to 12-year period difference.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus can't have both of those. They can be about that, and that's where scholars start to say, well, if they're kind of saying it was about that time, that's where we start to really loosen up.
See, that was what I was more familiar with, because I thought it was 4 or 5 AD is what I wanted to say, but you're saying it's 6 AD is when Quirinius or Cyrenius, how do you say that name?
Cyrenius is fine.
Cyrenius, that's what the King James Version says.
Yeah.
Because I think some other scholars refer to him as Quirinius.
That would be the more accurate pronunciation of his Latin name.
Okay.
But Cyrenius is a modernization that works. I mean, we know who we're talking about.
So, could we push it back into the AD period? Could it be as early as 5 BC and as late as 6 AD?
It becomes a bigger problem if we use Quirinius, Cyrenius as the date, because we also know that Tiberius has been reigning for 14 or 15 years, and that, if you use Cyrenius's date, doesn't work. You just can't make all of those things work. Tiberius in his 14th year is somewhere around 26 to 28 AD. So, yeah, you create all of these. Jesus is about 30 years old then. So you see how that then pushes you back into this 1 to 2 BCE period.
Okay.
I mean, this is tough.
Yeah.
But in defense of them, and maybe I don't need to defend them, I don't think they're interested in this answer. I think we're interested in it. I think the modern reader has placed a lot of emphasis. I know my birthday. You know yours. We have September 11th. We all know what that means. We have D-Day, June 6th. We know these things. They don't care. They don't have documents where they celebrate their birthday. And we have documents from Egypt where people say, I think I'm 12 years old. I think I'm 28. They just don't know. And I could see Jesus being one of them, saying to Luke, or he didn't say to Luke, but he said to his disciples, I think I'm about 30 years old. And I don't think people realize how significant that is.
Because birthdays are such a big deal to us.
Yeah, and they're not in the ancient world.
Do we have any idea, is that just like within the last century that birthdays became a big deal, or is that...
I don't know how far that spans, to be honest. I know that they place a lot more emphasis on the death moment. That's an important date. We know the day Augustus dies. We don't know as much about his birth date, but we lost someone. And so the ancient world seems to focus more on the loss or the departure of this person. And I think there's a lot more interest in the Gospels on the day Jesus died than the day he's born.
Mm-hmm.
I think they care about that. And they're telling us the day of the week there. No one approaches a birthday of the week. That's not even a hint of that.
That's interesting. So I know with our birthdays, we spend a lot of time giving gifts, and especially at Christmas, we give gifts. Can you talk about some of those gifts that Jesus was? I mean, do we believe that he was really given gold and frankincense and myrrh, or is that just a myth? Or what do you think about that?
As a historian, I don't want to push back against the Christmas nativity story that we tell. I'm not trying to ruin Christmas or anything that way. But a historian, I think, sees a few different things. Matthew doesn't tell the story of the shepherds. He's not really interested in that. He doesn't hint at that. And instead, if you think as a reader, I'm only reading Matthew for a moment. The story starts by these men, 3, 5, half a dozen, and they show up at Herod's, the king of the Jews' home or palace, and they say, "Where is the king of the Jews?" And right away, you have irony in the story. Herod should say, "Well, I'm the king of the Jews," or "My offspring will be the king of the Jews," and he has no idea where the king of the Jews is. And the reader is almost at that point laughing at what Matthew's doing, and it's a developing indictment. And the developing indictment is these foreigners have seen something so obvious in heaven that they can follow it, and they need a little bit of instruction. And Jesus is literally born within a 5-mile radius of where Herod's standing, theoretically, in that narrative. And you wonder, he has no idea. And so Matthew's indicting. He's telling a story where he's trying to say Herod missed it. And so
why wouldn't Herod just say, "I'm the king of the Jews. What do you want?"
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I think Luke doesn't see the irony in the story. I don't think he appreciates that part being so formative. He sees adoration. He sees worship. He sees people being prepared as the primary part of the story. And what I think a lot of people miss is two authors didn't tell anything about the birth. Mark is not interested, and John is not interested. In fact, if we only had them, we would struggle to even know what his parents' names were. But with Matthew, we get some naming. With Mark, in a very later verse, we get a naming. And so I want to put it in balance here. I'm not saying the wise men are a fiction created by Matthew. That's not my intent. But I would say that story is given prominence to indict people, to say, "Hey, you missed it." And they brought gifts. I think they're peculiar gifts. Just looking at them as a kind of a story, you have something that's offered in the care for dead bodies. You have a gift that's offered in the temple as an incense offering.
So, yeah, let's talk about that, because I don't know how reputable this is. I do remember watching a film called Mystery of the Three Kings. Does that sound familiar to you at all?
Sure.
And one of the things that they talked about was these gifts were kind of royalty gifts, and one of them was for anointing the dead.
It is, yeah.
Which one is that?
Myrrh.
Okay. So Can you talk a little bit more about myrrh and why that was symbolically significant?
Yeah, I maybe not symbolically significant as much as practically. The care of the dead involves, at the time of death, filling the orifices of the face with aloes and other spices to effectively keep the decaying body smells down. And the wealthy had access to things like myrrh, which are much more powerful. And you fill your mouth and your ears and your nose with that. It's a pretty strong aroma. And so I think the reader is going to be shocked. They have no use for myrrh in their everyday lives. They haven't seen that. There are some recipes from first century Rome that have myrrh by very small amounts in their actual cooking. And so a Judean impoverished family is going to see that, and almost the only connection they could make, hey, this is used for anointing dead people. And I don't know, Matthew unfortunately doesn't comment. He doesn't hint that, like Luke will tell us, Mary kept all this in herself. Matthew just lets that slide. So I don't know if it's symbolic as much as you have wise men who seem to see the end. They seem to know where this story is going to end. And that's a powerful metaphor, I think, for Matthew.
I mean, would that be unusual for me, a baby gift would be a birth, a gift of life. And
Yeah.
why would you be giving myrrh if it's as a death gift? I mean,
Yeah, why's hard for me. I don't know a good why for that. For Matthew, it's productive to say these people saw a lot more than Herod. You have this, if you will, kind of a connotation of the temple. The prayers of the saints ascend on the burning incense. And so there's our frankincense. I guess the gold? I really don't know on the gold. Everybody appreciates gold, right? So I don't know if we could really say a lot more about that. And then this connotation, he will die. So Matthew's given them the means to get out of town now.
okay.
And he's given them an insinuation of where this story's going to end. He's foreshadowing, and he's implied a connection to the temple.
The temple with frankincense.
Yes.
So,
And strangely, his action against the temple in cleansing it kills him. So you have a full-bodied bookend. Here's where the story starts, and now we know where it ends. And it's an interesting way to tell a story.
so do you think that was invented by Matthew and that didn't really happen, or?
We have loaded modern terms, and if I say invented, that implies purpose to me. Do I think there's potential legendary count in the birth stories? I would say yes, I do. I'm comfortable saying that legends are a part of that story, but to make Matthew an author who invents with purpose, I don't have a way to confirm that as a historian. Right? I can compare Matthew and Luke and see that the stories have grown, and when they have shared details, I can say that. So I'm trying to waffle. I'm trying to say here, that's pushing me in an area I don't know if I can really say that for sure.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Thomas Wayment. In our next episode, we'll talk about some of the stories of Herod slaughtering the children. How many babies were likely killed in that operation?
We're talking about a very small village, 200 to 300 people. And I don't want to minimize this. I want to be really careful that anybody listening understands. I am not trying to say it's not a big deal that 1 or 2 babies passed away. But 1 or 2 babies passing away in a pogrom or this kind of search to get Jesus wouldn't typically appear in a historical source.
If you're interested in a transcript of this conversation, we'll have it out shortly at our Amazon page, or if you'd like to subscribe for just $10 a month, I'll be the first to send it to you so you can get a head start on learning more. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.